we have found has been very successful in terms of just driving people into our units, our studios, our doors, if you will, is the use of social media and influencers, whether it's celebrities or athletes, using these services and validating these services. That definitely increases awareness and drives demand.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by John Klein, co-founder and CEO of Pause. In this episode, we discuss the company's experiential wellness studios. We talk about the growing demand for preventative and holistic health services, plus John shares his plans for franchising, launching Pause branded products, and more. Let's get into it. Hi, John. Welcome to Fitt Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Joe, great to be here. Excited to talk to you and share a brand with your community.
Yeah, for sure. And you have a pretty extensive background kind of across the industry and in and out of wellness in general. And of course, now working on a bunch of cool things with Pause. So yeah, why don't you take a second and introduce yourself and tell us about what you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm John Klein, founder of Pause. I've been in the health wellness space for most of my career, largely around brick and mortar health and fitness and wellness. In the late 90s, I was with TSI as their director of real estate and acquisitions, and then moved over to Equinox in '02 to become their head of real estate, and worked closely with, the senior leadership team there, Harvey and the team, to think about scaling that business. I joined with 10 units at the time, all on the East Coast. We put together a rollout plan to scale the brand nationally into all major markets, and executed that plan over 16 years to build out what the businesses today. Along the way, we acquired SoulCycle. SoulCycle had 6 studios at the time, and they were kind of on the forefront of the boutique studio space, and worked with the founders there and pulled out the Equinox playbook for that brand and scaled it, to 100 plus units nationally, Canada, and international as well. So left Equinox in 2017. As I was, thinking about leaving, thought about what I want to do next, leverage my skill sets, my knowledge base, so to speak, and saw really 2 trends emerging. One, the boutique studio fitness space was on fire with SoulCycle and Barry's and OTF and, many, many others. And also saw the nascent beginnings of the recovery space and the cryo center or the IV, lounge or the sauna studio, but no one had put all those services together under one roof in a, kind of a premium lifestyle, or we like to say Pause experiential fashion. And so, classic kind of founder story, found a partner, a former colleague of mine at Equinox who ran marketing for the West Coast, and, white papered it out. What could this look like? What can an experiential wellness studio look like, focused on holistic healing and all things mind, body recovery, and took from our learnings over the last 2 decades, the brands that we worked at. My partner worked at Sports Club LA, and I got to know him when Equinox acquired Sports Club LA, and he moved over to our corporate offices on the West Coast, and ideated Pause literally from scratch, and raised money, friends and family. He and I both wrote the biggest checks because we believed in it that much, found the space, and, after a bit of a journey, got our first unit open in 2016. We set out to create this one-stop shop for all things holistic healing and mind-body recovery. So we had float tanks, infrared saunas, and cold plunges, and then got on solid footing, and then decided to add additional modalities along the way, including IV therapy, and really started to hone the business, learn, made some mistakes, learned from our mistakes, got the model down right. And in 2019, raised some capital and signed a new location in West Hollywood, California, to really take all of our learnings and apply to that kind of new and improved Pause 2.0, if you will, and signed the lease in late 2019 and filed plans in early 2020. And then the pandemic hit. And so we took a deep breath and paused, so to speak, no pun intended. And then we saw some really interesting things happen with our business, and we were able to stay open because we have nurses on staff and we were deemed to be an essential business. Those nurses were doing the vitamin IVs and the intramuscular injections. And so after taking a little bit of a dip over the first 90 days, we actually saw a surge in demand for our services. Why? Because, top of mind going in, beginning in the pandemic, but, in the middle of the pandemic was immunity, health optimization, stress, sleep, anxiety. Everybody was concerned about their health and wellness and overall, particularly immunity optimization. So we saw the demand and it just kept continuing. And then we made the decision to go forward with the second studio. After a long journey, difficulty getting permits and inspections, and that studio opened. We opened still in the middle of pandemic, masks on in April of 21, and had, huge first month and second month, incrementally higher, and was a huge success out of the gates. And then along the way, we raised additional capital. So in the last 15 months, we've raised over $5 million towards studio growth and our newest initiative, which we'll get into in a minute, which is franchising to smartly and rapidly scale Pause nationwide. With that capital, we signed 3 more leases. One studio recently opened up in the South Bay, kind of Manhattan Beach trade area. We're under construction in Brentwood, California, and we're going to break ground on our 5th corporate studio in Studio City, California. So by this time next year, we'll have 5 studios in Los Angeles. We'll clearly be the dominant player in the, holistic healing mind body recovery space in LA. And because of the momentum, because of our, shareholder and investor enthusiasm, we said, how can we scale this thing nationally? Clearly there's demand for what we're doing outside of California. And there are other brands out there in our space who have shown great success in major urban markets and also, smaller markets where people are still suffering from stress, sleep deprivation, anxiety, the need for athletic recovery. They want immunity optimization. So clearly there's a market for this nationwide. And that's when we set out to create a franchise model, which has been taking us a lot of heavy lifting over the last 9 months. And I'm happy to say that we went to market 30 days ago. Our FDD dropped in those, non-regulatory states or kind of over-the-counter approval states with respect to the FDD. Certain states take longer. And we hired and made an agreement with an outside consulting firm to help us with the onboarding and sales process of new candidates called Repum. They work with a lot of fast growing franchise brands who want to get into the space. And after the first 30 days, the response has been incredible. The brand has been incredibly well received, both by the franchise brokerage community, as well as, organic leads coming in from all over the country, people familiar with our brand, or at least familiar with what the brand does and the services it provides, and feels the need and sees the need for having a studio like Pause in their hometown. So we're off to the races with the franchise model, and I've said a lot, so yeah. I'll take a pause and see if you have any follow-up questions on that, and we want to guide the conversation, into a certain channel.
No, it was fantastic, and I think sets the stage really nicely for not only what you're planning with Pause and the trajectory of that, but I think even a couple of the initial thoughts as you were talking about is just given the experience at Equinox so early on, and then seeing SoulCycle and helping develop that brand, right? It's like Equinox is one model where it's like, and even with the studio concepts, it's like they're going to maintain everything in-house. They're not going to franchise it. They're not going to, they want to maintain that kind of control over the brand. And then in this case, having that experience and then saying, we are going to model this out. We're going to open the first couple studios, make sure that we understand how this business runs and have a sense of what works and, maybe what doesn't, and then elect to franchise when you think about the growth of, and we'll certainly talk about this trend a little bit, but, holistic wellness and immunity and recovery and all the things that go into that. What was that decision-making process like? And you talk about now, like being well received, obviously, like, feeling kind of validated in that choice, but I'm sure it wasn't easy.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And both my partner and I specifically come from corporate owned background. So we did have a lot of internal discussions about the franchise model and what it meant for our brand and what we would need to do to ensure success. And our definition of success really has two priorities. One is financial success, right? It's got to be profitable for the franchisor and the franchisee, but you also have to maintain brand integrity. In my almost 20 years at Equinox, I remember conversations sitting around the executive boardroom with Harvey, the CEO of Equinox, and why don't we franchise? And his response was, no one's going to treat the brand like we do. No one's going to covet and care for the brand like we do. And that's true. That said, there are some incredible brand stories out there in the franchise world of Orange Theory Fitness, Dry Bar, Heyday. I think we're seeing this emergent trend of more lifestyle brands, kind of urban lifestyle brands going the route of franchising because it can be done. Is it a little harder to do? And do you got to, have more people in the field and travel a little more to make sure the brand standards are being upheld in Cincinnati the same way they are in Austin, the same way they are in New York City? Absolutely. But if the management team is committed to that initiative, which we are, we think we can maintain, our brand standard. So yes, it was a difficult decision and, a lot of kicking around pros and cons of do we franchise? Do we not franchise? But look, the benefit of franchise is, scaling nationally rapidly, right? Again, if you look at some of the other players in our space, they've done an incredible job selling hundreds upon hundreds of licenses already after 5 or 6 years of being at it. And, we think we could do the same. We think our brand is that coveted from a brand perspective, as well as the services that we offer. So we think there's certainly, hundreds upon hundreds of markets and franchisees or licensees that want to open a pause in their hometown.
For sure. Yeah. And I think it's exciting to see now, once you get that kind of flywheel spinning with the momentum and the interest in opening locations, it does tend to move a lot faster and have that kind of
Absolutely.
upside from a growth perspective. And then you talked about the, obviously during the pandemic, it was kind of this, everything shut down. You see gyms and even parks. I was just thinking back to, there was a time that when the lockdowns were going into effect, like they were going around and taking down nets at like basketball courts.
Yeah.
And like they didn't want people at the park or at the beach, and just thinking like, wow, that's probably some of the best things that we could have been doing was trying to stay physically active or being outdoors or being in the sunlight. And I think in many ways you had this shift or reprioritization of wellness, and people were just like, we'll do anything. Like, how do we protect ourselves? How do we improve? How do we de-stress, recover, optimize, all those words, right? That were certainly in the lexicon, but now like very, very top of mind.
Yep.
And the services that you're providing at Pause like fell right into, that kind of Venn diagram of things everybody was trying to do.
Yeah.
So now as you think about what that offering looks like based on kind of what you learned, based on where the trends are, like what are some of the like main kind of pillars of it? And then how do you see that maybe evolving?
We have 7 different unique services that we offer at Pause. So like I said, it is truly a one-stop shop for all things holistic healing and mind-body recovery. We have flotation tanks, we have saunas, we have cold plunges, we have really at scale, when we scale nationally through the franchise model, we're going to be the only brand that I'm familiar with that has contrast therapy, which is cold plunge and infrared sauna in the same room, where you kind of circuit train between the two. And there's phenomenal studies on the benefits of both using those modalities on a singular basis, but even more powerful when you combine them in the same session. Vitamin IVs, red light beds, cryotherapy. So like I said, 7 different service, and or revenue levers, if you think about it from a financial perspective, that we can pull on. And then we also have product. And the product that we have right now is all third party, about 100 SKUs on our shelves. Product sales represents a little less than 10% of our revenue. But we are in the process of starting to white label product in, certain categories: sleep, stress reduction, detoxification, immunity optimization. So when you walk into a Pause franchise, 2 or 3 years from now, in Cincinnati or Austin, you're going to see 30 to 40% of the SKUs on their shelves under the Pause brand. So we are truly creating a lifestyle brand in the recovery, mind, body healing space. And that looks like services, products, potentially, retreats, corporate kind of retreats, vacation type of retreats. We're in discussions now with some hospitality brands who see what we're doing. The hotel spa hasn't been revolutionized and changed for, decades upon decades. And when you travel, what do you want to do? You want to de-stress. If you're traveling for business from LA to New York or overseas, you want to make sure your immunity system is optimized. You want a great night's sleep. All of our services and products are geared towards that. So, imagine doing a business trip from LA to New York and in the same hotel, being able to press an elevator button down to something that looks like Pause, 7 different recovery modalities, all geared towards what you're really, challenging you on that 48-hour business trip.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. And the opportunities there, even as you're talking about it, I don't know if this is on your roadmap, but like even digital content or what people can access remotely and how that scales. It sounds like the number of ways that you're thinking about this from a in-person experiential, like really kind of building that customer relationship is pretty powerful as well. Curious to hear how you think about, and again, experience in this industry and having kind of seen some of these trends coming. Do you anticipate somebody like an Equinox or another big box gym, or, you talked about hospitality a little bit and reinventing the kind of spa, this being attractive to them? There's certainly instances where they're starting to put in cryotherapy, they're starting to put in massage, they're building out some of these offerings. But to say, even through a partnership, maybe we put one inside of a X gym or just like the hotel, or maybe they roll out their own kind of offering. I guess what I'm getting at is, do you anticipate this becoming kind of the par for the course just across fitness broadly in terms of gyms, studios, and them having a holistic wellness recovery brand in their arsenal?
Yeah, I think, look, Equinox is already starting to put some of these services in. If you go to the Equinox Hotel, they have some of these services. They have vitamin IVs, they have cryotherapy, they have infrared saunas. It's not easy to do. It's not easy to bolt one of these on. It may look easy on paper, but the operations of this type of facility versus a 40,000 square foot gym with 5,000 members is a different type of operation. It does synergize. So look, don't get me wrong. There are definitely some brands out there who are putting in the cold plunge, putting in an infrared sauna. Are they putting it in at the scale that we are today? No. But I think, the more exposure to these services and the benefits to these services and what these benefits offer is just a win for the entire space. So, Equinox has 4,000 to 5,000 members, in an average club. They're servicing a general kind of region or trade area of 100,000 people. There's still so much business to go around for a 3,000 square foot studio like Pause to be successful. And I haven't seen a large format gym, like I said, put in the scale and the number of services that we have yet. Not to say that it will come, but yeah, they're investigating it. Other brands are investigating it. They're dabbling in it. But I just think the more awareness for what we're doing and the modalities that we're offering is going to be, a lift for the entire space and everybody who's playing in it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's what we're starting to see is like there's such overlap in the interest that, and frankly, once you start, it's like I'm already taking care of myself to the extent that I have a gym membership and that I'm, stopping and trying to eat somewhere healthy. And as a wellness recovery studio pops up, like that certainly fits right along the lines of what I would like to be doing to take care of myself. When it comes to the specific, kind of treatments or modalities, it's one of those areas where it's like, anecdotally, there's a lot of evidence that many of these things work. And then the scientific evidence is now catching up to a lot of those things. And oftentimes it's, I try to make sense of it myself. And it's like, at a certain point in time, all of the things that we do now for our health kind of started out on the fringe and then slowly move more and more into the mainstream, such that people were like, oh, this trend of fasting, it's like, that's not a trend. People have been doing that for
Yeah.
thousands of
Yeah.
years. Or meditation and breath work. It's like, no, it's just getting brought into the mainstream. So how do you think about kind of introducing the treatments, or kind of standing behind or validating the treatments that are kind of even new in terms of where the research stands?
Yeah. Well, like you said, using cold water exposure to improve your mental state and your physical state has been used for centuries. Same with heat, IV drips. I mean, how for at least, multiple decades, people in hospitals have been getting, IV drips. So the concept of having saline solution dripped into your body has been out there for decades upon decades. I would say over the last 10 years, the interest of putting nutraceuticals or vitamins into them to kind of boost or optimize your health is relatively new. But yeah, everything we do, there's published, studies in terms of the modalities that we put out there, whether it's cold water immersion, heat therapy, the combination of cold water immersion, the heat therapy, i.e. contrast therapy in the same room, flotation therapy. There's, one doctor who's been, studying patients for almost a decade now in float tanks and measuring their brain waves and seeing, literally seeing them get into their parasympathetic and their brain waves slowing down as a mental or mind treatment, as well as the relaxation that it offers. You're floating in 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt. Most people are deficient in magnesium, and the body absorbs it. So we feel pretty confident that the 7 key modalities that we're offering right now, there's evidence that they are proven and they work for either mind, body, and a lot of them mind, body in the same service.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in terms of, thinking about, I know you're both thinking about it from what's effective, what do people want, what's improving the overall experience. And then also, how does that fit into kind of the business model and profit model when you think about
Yep.
these levers? Do you think like, hey, we'll take these 7 and continue to scale them? And then if we need to introduce something new, if we want to introduce something new, test it on a small format, kind of vet it, see where it fits in, how do we operationalize it, and then scale it? Is that how, what I'm getting is, how would that get into the overall flow such that it's something now, me as a franchisee, I could offer that at my location?
Yeah. No, look, that's a good question, because there is the balance between there are modalities out there that we have chosen not to add that are effective, but they're not for everyone. So we're looking at a balance of what's effective and what's popular and what's, quite frankly, commercially viable that we can get a return on, just putting my business, hat on for a second.
Yeah.
And so there's probably 20 different services and modalities out there that all fit under our umbrella. But what are going to be the most popular, drive the most utilization, and then therefore drive the most revenue? In our first studio, we only had 4 out of the 7 modalities. In our second studio that we opened in 2021, we added cryotherapy and we added red light therapy as well. And we did a lot of research before we did it. And, we were comfortable and confident in those decisions to add them, that there would be a kind of return on those. And so that's not to say that there's something else out there that fits, within our criteria and within our ethos that we'll evaluate and could bring in the future and modify our program a little bit. But we've been at this for 5 years now, and most of our services are proven, tried, true, and tested. We know there's demand. Like our saunas and cold plunge rooms pretty much sell out on a daily basis, even Monday through Friday. There's so much demand for that modality right now. Our float tanks are incredibly popular. Our vitamin IV business is, doing really, really well. And look, the beauty about this and other brands that are getting into this space is, like, we're in the first inning of this. Like, we're just warming up. Like, these services and the benefit of this service are just now getting out to the public en masse. There's been the kind of the fringe biohackers, kind of health wellness enthusiasts out there that have known about this, for last, 5 years, let's call it, but it's becoming more and more mainstream every day. And, we're just super excited to be playing in the space and be able to capture some of that market share.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and something I wanted to touch on too. And maybe a couple more questions as we get towards the end of the conversation. Like, with that point, given that it was kind of nascent, or still is, right? The early innings, to your point. And some people knew about it. And now obviously more people wanting to pursue this holistic version of wellness. How much of it is an education, marketing, recruiting people, for lack of a better term, versus once the word is out there, them pursuing it and there maybe being more demand than you were even anticipating?
No, there's definitely, an educational component to it. There's also, what we have found has been very successful in terms of just driving people into our units, our studios, our doors, if you will, is the use of social media and influencers in social media who are coming into our space, and we're talking about, you know, look, we have the benefit of being in LA, right? Which is celebrity capital of the world. So on any given day, we've got 5 million followers, 10 million followers, 20 million followers a day walking through our facilities. There's a YouTube video out with Jessica Alba and some of her friends spending, half a day, kind of the hero's journey, if you will, at Pause and loving every minute of it. She reposted that on her Instagram and she's got 16 million followers. And so when the public sees whether it's celebrities or athletes using these services and validating the services, that definitely increases awareness and drives demand. You have the whole, wellness podcast category now that's, exploding with Andrew Huberman or David Sinclair or Dave Asprey, or the list goes on and on. If you kind of cull the data in terms of what their, top 5, longevity, biohack modalities are, we offer almost all of them under our roof: cold exposure, optimizing, vitamins and minerals on a daily basis. There's other things that anybody could do, like intermittent fasting is one of them. So there's just so many data streams coming at the public right now that are talking about this space and this category. And, let's call it holistic healing or preventative health. It just fuels our business on a daily basis.
Yeah. And in terms of, looking ahead, you kind of laid out thinking about franchising and scaling that, talking about the opportunity in a whole bunch of different kind of verticals related to this, whether it's hospitality or retreats or corporate kind of wellness, and even, products, thinking about what that looks like from the overall experience. As you think about, the back half of this year, and what are the kind of key priorities, or even something you're fired up about, right? And we should be on the lookout for. Is there anything that comes to mind that says like, yeah, if we get through the end of the year and like these couple things happen, it'll be really exciting, or this is something to look out for?
Yeah, well, our days are full.
Yeah.
We're opening up 2 additional corporate studios between now and Q1 of next year. Very important facilities in LA that help build the brand and, quite frankly, build, cash flow to support, other aspects of the business. So we're super excited about that. We're incredibly excited about franchising. We were very excited going into it. Now that we've launched and we've seen the response and the reaction to, Pause on a national basis, we're just even more excited and working very diligently on that and building out the team. Like, the one thing we've learned, and Jeff and I both have corporate experience in running corporate studios, is that, to be successful, to ensure the success of your franchisees, we need to hire people from that space who understand that business. And so we're rounding out that team. We just hired a senior director of operations who was a 10-year veteran at Orange Theory Fitness. And so we have a lot of hiring to do to build out the team over the next 6 months. And then, ancillary, but still exciting is the product. We're going to go to market over the holiday with this sleep tincture brand, under the Pause brand. It's actually a partnership with Quicksilver Scientific, who's the best in category. But we're going to white label it, and that's going to be our foray into product. And like I said, over the next few years, we're going to add more and more onto our shelves of our corporate studios as well as our franchise studios.
Yeah, a lot to look forward to, and a lot of different angles. As we wrap up, if folks were interested in learning more, right, we have the franchise angle, the potentially hiring angle, the come in and experience it from the customer perspective. Where would you point them? What's the best way to get in touch?
I love talking to people about, our business and the space and meeting new people. There's, you can learn something from talking to the 22-year-old out of college or the private equity investor, and everyone in between. So, my email is john@pawstudio.com. You can learn more about the brand and franchising at our website, which is Paw Studio. You can hit me up on LinkedIn, hit me up or email, and jump onto our website to learn about the business and click on the franchise page if you're interested in learning more about our franchise operation.
Awesome. Yeah. I hope people take you up on that and get in touch. And I appreciate you making some time to share the story with us today.
Likewise, man. Great to be here and great to share our story with your community. Thanks, Joe.